evening.
Nice of you to join us.
Now that we're all here, I call to order the June 1st, 2015 City Council meeting. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we don't have any proclamations or presentations tonight, so councilors, does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent docket?
No.
Do you have a motion and a second?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. And that is approved 5-0. Next is item 4, which is the public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. Are any of these?
I believe the Hansons are the
They're on down
applicants,
there.
so they can speak during that. This person would have to speak now.
Okay, so we have one speaker, Shane Hatfield.
I think they're all three for the stop sign.
They're all for the stop sign?
Okay, okay. Ms. Hatfield is going to be one of your witnesses when you plead. Is that correct?
Mr. Hatfield. So Mrs. Hanson's father.
Shane, Mr.
I'm Mr. Hatfield. I live on the corner of Question and are here to speak.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, you'll be able to do that during the item. Then.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, that moves us to item 5. We don't have item 5, nothing. So we are going to move to public hearings. And the public hearing on item A is receive public comment regarding a request for a map amendment to rezone property addressed at 4420 West 6th Avenue from existing commercial general and agricultural to commercial general / RTM or to family and multifamily / agriculture, CC-15-56. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Galloway.
Yes, I'd ask Aaron Baggerly to make the presentation, please. Aaron?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Aaron Baggerly, Development Service here to staff presentation on the map amendment at 4420 West 6th Avenue. The applicant, Bourbon Street Square, has requested to go from commercial general, CG, and agricultural to RTM zoning, residential two-family, multifamily district. Here's a property map of the area. The hatched area is the portion of the property that is being requested to rezoning to RTM. As you can see, the pinkish salmon color area here is currently commercial general zoning. The lighter white and green portion is agricultural zoning. The applicant has requested RTM. This area of the agriculture area at one time was within the 100-year floodplain. Some site work has been done on the property, and it is no longer floodplain, so it is out of the 100-year floodplain. And the rest of the CG is not in the floodplain either. This is 6th Avenue, right off of 6th Avenue. This is RTM is adjacent, which is the Squires Landing apartment community. This right here is Frontier Engineering, I believe. And this parcel to the east is the Honda car dealership at this point. As I mentioned, the RTM is adjacent to the west of the requested rezoning area. The staff findings, RTM does not meet the C3 plan, our comprehensive plan for this, but commercial and agricultural does in this area. And like I said, agricultural is a floodplain area. And as I said, it is adjacent to RTM zoning. Does council have any questions?
Being the new one, can you let me know what C3?
C3 is our comprehensive plan. It's our 2030 vision.
Right. Okay.
for the city, and we shortened it down to the
To the C3.
C3
Got it.
plan.
All right, thank you.
Great question.
Thank you.
Counselors, any questions?
No question.
Saren?
Thank you. Do we vote on this now, Mr.?
You're going to have a hearing?
Yeah, I guess we are. Yes, I guess we are. Okay, so I will now open the public hearing. And do we have anyone here to speak? Okay, so I will close the public hearing. Mr. Baggerly.
Planning Commission recommended approval of this map amendment 7-0. Any other questions?
Counselors?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have a motion?
Certainly. Is this the time? Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the map amendment, CC-15-56. And it is approved with a vote of 5-0. On to item B. Receive public comment regarding the proposed 2015-2016 City of Stillwater operating budget. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Galloway.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Included in your packet with the resolution is an attachment, which is the spreadsheet that is prescribed by state statute, listing all of the general fund, special funds, and sub-funds of the general fund. Collectively, those represent the general fund budget to be approved by the City Council. Total expenditures $71,976,886. Those expenditures have not changed much in the last couple of months. I appreciate Mrs. Lamb setting up here when I was absent on the 18th, and she made a presentation, presented some spreadsheets. Those numbers had minute cents and few dollars changes, but they're all practical purposes. Those are the numbers, and I would be glad to answer any questions. Open for public hearing.
Okay. I will now open the public hearing, but
No request.
I don't believe we have any, so I will close the public hearing.
Okay, again, as we mentioned at the last meeting, we had great public input this year with the budget fair. We've had some public input at other meetings. It worked really well. We appreciated the council's input. We went back, made some modifications. Again, it's not the greatest of all years financially, but it's still we're projecting a very healthy year compared to where we have been the last 10 for sure. It'll be a comparable year, but this year has been very good, and last year as well. So with that, we are recommending that the council approve the resolution, which you'll take up later in the meeting.
Any comments or questions at this point? Okay, let's move on. We're going to go to general orders. And under general orders, on item 7, consider Sharon Hansen appeal of denial of request for stop sign at Mansfield and Country Club Drive. Mr. Dorman, since we do not do these very often, could you please explain the procedure to us?
Section 29-32 of the city code vests the city manager with very broad discretion to post traffic signs and things of that nature. So basically, decisions with regard to the location of stop signs, traffic lights, things of that nature are done administratively through the city manager's guidance. There is a provision in this code, however, for if a citizen was to come to the city manager and request that a sign be placed at a particular location, if the manager's office disagreed with that, or staff in this instance disagrees with it, then there is actually an appeal process. And the appeal process is to come to the city council and ask the city council to override the staff city manager's decision and order the sign installed at a particular location. And that's essentially what you have here tonight. There's not a particular standard of review or anything. I mean, it is a discretionary item with respect to the manager's authority, and so I would assume something along the lines of abuse of discretion would have to be shown before you could override the manager's decision.
Okay. Mr. Galloway, what's going
I
on?
would, I think probably the simplest way to handle this, whenever we get a request for any traffic control device, be it a speed limit sign, no parking sign, addition of stop sign or other signs, of course, I don't make those decisions just unilaterally. I employ both public safety and our transportation department. Jason Peak, Dr. Peak takes the lead on those evaluations, and I'd like for Dr. Peak, if it would please the mayor and council, to give you a brief overview of what he analyzed when the request was made, the information that he's collected, which gives you the basis of why we felt it was not warranted. After that, you could ask questions of him. That would give you kind of the history of where we are, and then you could allow the applicants to come before you and make their appeal for overriding that.
Okay.
So if that's agreeable, then I'd like to ask Dr. Peak to come to stand and give you a brief report.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Jason Peak, Transportation Director, City of Stillwater. As discussed, we have an appeal for a stop sign request by Ms. Hanson at the intersection of Mansfield and Country Club Drive there on the west part of town. And what we do as staff, we get these requests and we go and we look at what standards or guidance applies to these. And stop signs are a regulatory sign within the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a guidance document and a standards document developed for traffic control devices nationwide. And there's specific criteria that we look at for stop signs. What I will tell you is stop signs are guidance, so it's not a standard that says you cannot install a stop sign if it doesn't meet this criteria, but from an engineering perspective, and that's what I'm here to present to you tonight, is the analysis that we use to evaluate placement of stop signs. And basically there are three criteria where you look at a stop sign from an engineering standpoint being what we would call warranted at low volume streets. We have two low volume neighborhood streets, and that would be looking for two of these conditions to be satisfied. Does the intersection have more than three legs? So are there basically more than three approaches to this intersection? This intersection does have 4 approaches. Does the intersection have more than 2,000 units of traffic per day entering the intersection? And that's a sum total of vehicles, pedestrians, bikes, all using that intersection. So in order to evaluate that, we do traffic counts. We know vehicles predominantly are going to be the largest volumes out there. This intersection has on average 400 units per day, so only a fifth of that 2,000 units criteria. The other 2 factors are sight restrictions. You know, as you approach the intersection, is there limited sight distance given the speed to see whether other people are coming into the intersection? And with this intersection, it meets the sight criteria. There are no physical obstructions limiting, permanent physical obstructions limiting the intersection. But if a car was parked close to the intersection, that could be considered an obstruction. That's typically temporary. And then the last criteria we look at is a history of crashes. And this is looking, is there something about this intersection that systematically, with the crashes that are occurring, would be corrected by an installation of stop sign. So even if you had crashes, but let's say you had a distracted driving or you had a drunk driver that had an accident at that intersection, That's not something that a stop sign typically is guaranteed to stop. Basically, we're looking at failure to yield, and this intersection had 0 crashes within the last 5 years at that intersection. Now, that doesn't record near misses. We don't have a good way to kind of measure that, but those are the criteria we look at. And so in response to the Hanson's request, when we looked at our engineering criteria, it did not meet the warrants for installation of a stop sign. And so our recommendation to the city manager was based on engineering judgment, a stop sign is not warranted, and that was the response put back to the Hansons. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I've got a question, Mr.
Sure.
Reed. I know stop signs, what about yield or slow children? I mean, does this impact
Sure.
those types of signage also?
So yield signs follow a similar criteria for that analysis. If it was the council's desire to basically not accept staff's recommendation, I think a yield sign would be something we'd look at. One thing to keep in mind is stop signs in the neighborhood in general. There's over 37 intersections within that neighborhood, and if you go across Country Club Road into the other neighborhood, we just don't have a history of installing stop signs in our new neighborhoods. And part of it's like I said, the engineering requirements don't justify them. But yield signs are something that could be used in lieu of stop signs. Stop signs, like I said, are an alternative. It's just they won't satisfy the warrant criteria. And the other sign you mentioned, the slow children at play, there's really no research that says that those are effective. A lot of the traffic in these neighborhoods are the people that live there. They drive the speed they feel comfortable on those streets. And those signs really aren't a deterrent to getting people to slow down.
I'm sure we'll hear this in the petitioner's address, but what is the issue that I see there are 5 kids under 7 living in? Is it crossing the street or playing in the street?
I'd let the petitioners, but just overall concern of the safe, the way we interpret the request is there are small children in the neighborhood. There's an intersection with no control on any approach. So basically it follows the rules of right-of-way. Drivers are, supposed to be aware of those rules. So there's no control, and there was concern from the applicants that control in their minds would improve the safety of the environment there. But, I'd let them speak to that explicitly.
Okay.
Anything else, councilors? Okay, let's.
I guess I would just add that on receipt of the recommendation from staff, always, whether it's stop signs, whether it's a speed limit sign or other traffic control signs, we live in obviously an urban area, and so we have an interaction of multiple transportation, pedestrians, people crossing, bicycles, and automobiles. Traffic signs on a street are, I believe, to help the movement of all transportation in a safe manner. And so when we look at these, and I think the criteria lends itself to this, it becomes somewhat of an improper, in my opinion, improper use of signs if they're used solely for one aspect. In other words, the traffic doesn't warrant it, but let's stop the traffic anyhow because of pedestrians. Or we've got a lot of cars, let them go anyhow, even though we got tons and tons of pedestrians. I don't think you should sacrifice either side of an issue, but you have to really look at these criteria and say what is a decision that meets the existing demands and meets the criteria for safe flow of everyone. And so, it's not always a decision that sounds palatable to the people who would like it, but we try to balance those. So, I appreciated their study, and the decision was to uphold the standards and not to place one. So that was the final decision. That's why we're here.
I have one more thing. I know 9th Street opened up in between Country Club and behind Trade and 51 Apartments. Is that, that is going to increase some traffic also.
addition to the east, the plat for that would eventually tie into Country Club.
Okay.
And so, when that develops and that occurs, that could push that volume threshold to a point that would warrant what we call warrant installation for a stop sign, but it's not present out there today.
Councilor Weaver?
I'm just looking at the chart that we've been given. As you turn off South Country Club, I noticed that there's 3 neighborhood intersections that you pass through before you get to this one. How are they signed?
There are no signs. Like I said, out of the 37 intersections near that neighborhood.
Okay, that 37 was referring to this neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
I
that was the standard of practice for those developments. We have stop signs as you approach Country Club Road that runs north-south, and that's typical for a higher volume, higher speed differential setup. But the local streets, there's really no stop signs, with the exception there is one in Country Club Estates, and there's some sight distance issues that I think warranted that installation, but I couldn't find any history on that. All right.
I might just add in response to that question is that many of our subdivisions and neighborhoods are not laid out with a grid pattern. By having winding streets in the neighborhood, some cul-de-sacs off of some intersection, some dead end, that entire configuration is a traffic calming configuration just to an extent. And so that's why you don't often see the signs at intersection in those neighborhoods, because the configuration is such that it really doesn't cause the type of intersection conflicts that you have on a grid pattern. And on a grid pattern, you do have some 2 ways and 4 ways more frequently in a grid pattern neighborhood.
I don't know if you're going to make a I guess we know your recommendation, but so would you recommend no yield sign as well? I know obviously no stop signs warranted, but would you warrant no yield sign?
I guess the way I would phrase it, staff's recommendation, there is no traffic control device needed. If council wanted to not accept staff's recommendation, we could look at it. You could direct us to install a yield sign. You could also direct us to do a stop sign. I know in my previous experience with another local government, this was fairly routine, citizens appealing stop sign requests. These low volume streets, when you apply this criteria, they will not warrant stop signs. And so, you're not going against MUTCD if you recommend us to install a stop sign. It's a guidance statement within that. But from an engineering standpoint, no traffic control device is needed.
I think I can understand the engineering standpoint, and last year I sent you a picture, Dr. Peak, of a thing in Salt Lake City, the orange flags.
Yes.
And when I think about kids and streets and no stop signs, what we really want is drivers to see something different that kind of takes you out of the zone of just driving through the neighborhood. And the orange, they're on streets that don't have stop signs, and in residential parts of Salt Lake City, it's just a stick with an orange, bright orange flag on a cup that hangs on a pole on either side, and there's a little sign that says, if you're crossing, carry the stick across. And it provides a lot of visibility when you're crossing, but it also, that bucket of orange flags on the corner is something so different that it really gets your attention. I mean, are there other creative ways we could think about helping this neighborhood?
I mean, there's lots of different things you can do for traffic calming and intersection right-of-way assignment. It's just the cost and expense of those. Signs typically are the least costly options, but there are other things. I mean, traffic circles, not full roundabouts, but where you actually build a small circle in the center of an intersection that basically forces people to slow down. They may turn left across that traffic circle as opposed to going around it. Some communities have what are called neighborhood traffic calming programs, and they set up different things to look at that control speed and approach. But in this case, we're just specifically kind of looking at signage.
How about if we hear from Sharon Hansen now and the others, Greg Hansen and Shane Hatfield.
This is the first I've heard of the report, so I found it interesting. Something that I want to add is that intersection is almost always a turning. Someone
Ms.
is turning
Hatfield,
left.
I'm sorry, it's my, Hansen.
Sorry.
It's my fault. Would you please state your name and your address?
My name is Sharon Hansen, 1316 West Osage Drive in Stillwater. As I was saying, that was the first I'd heard the report. I thought it was very interesting. But what I want to add to that intersection is, as you can see, the country club is going to, there's one home on the east side of that intersection. And then on the north, there's only one block. So everybody that comes, well, not everybody, but many people at that intersection will turn. And so it's a turning intersection. And so that's also something to consider. And they don't have to slow down. They can take that turn wide. They can, take it fast. And so what I want is slower traffic coming around the corner. And all the parents, have their own safety for their children. But if there could just be, a little help with, being more cautious at that intersection, that's my request. And also, both those roads, Mansfield Drive and Country Club Drive, are main arteries out of the neighborhood. Not that everybody has to go on those to get out. Of course they don't, but I guess only 1/5 of traffic, goes on it. Whatever the numbers were that we heard just a minute ago. So, but that's basically, and I am a grandmother. The father is here. The other neighbors have been talked to, and they agree that it would be nice to have some sort of slowdown, although maybe the slowdown doesn't work, and I kind of agree with you. We see that once, and we don't pay attention to it. But a yield sign. So.
Is there a homeowners association there?
Is there homeowners? I don't believe there is.
So the advertising.
No.
And you don't live in the neighborhood? It's
I
your
don't.
grandkids, you said?
Grandkids.
Okay. You just drew the short straw to make the request?
I just look out for their safety.
Anybody else have a question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg Hansen. If you would state your name and your address, please.
I'm Greg Hansen, 1316 West Osage. And I don't really have a lot to add. I mean, numbers are great. I like numbers. I'm an engineer myself, but not everything is based on numbers. Sometimes we're talking about safety, and we're talking about kids that live across the street from each other and like to talk to each other across the street, and people come around corners very fast. It would be nice to have some way to stop them or to slow them down and take another look. And that's really what's being asked for here, is the whole aspect of, can we have the city help us have a safer environment in that situation? So, like I say, I like numbers, but sometimes we go beyond numbers when we're talking about safety of people. That's all I got to say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Hansen. And the last speaker is Shane Hatfield.
My name is Shane Hatfield. I live at 1302 South Mansfield Drive. I want to thank the city manager and Dr. Joe Pesky. Is that what it is? Oh, side? Peak. Sorry. Close. Jason, for your hard work. I really appreciate it. I'm not an engineer. I do appreciate numbers and your research, though. I was a student here in Stillwater from 2000 until 2005. I loved the city. Last year, I moved my family back because I love the city and I got a great job offer here. One of the things I like about the city is we care about families and we care about children. That's very evident by the way you run things. That's why we're here today. We care about our children. We care about the children in the neighborhood. And I think that's consistent with your vision. I would add to what my father-in-law and mother-in-law have already said. There are no stop signs at any point on the street. So over this year, what I've observed is cars continually pick up speed until they get to my intersection. They take wide turns, which has been verified by a police officer for me who came and looked at the intersection. Then they increase their speed as they go down to 19th, and then they leave. There's really nothing to stop them. As you said earlier, people get in a neighborhood where they're familiar, they drive fast, they coast, they kind of turn off their brains because they're familiar with it. I think a stop sign would force them to slow down somewhat, stop, observe their surroundings, and then proceed. I myself almost saw a little girl get hit on that same street one day while I was jogging. It wasn't at the intersection, but a car was coming up the hill. It was increasing in speed. There was a UPS truck. The little girl almost ran out in front of it. I screamed, "No, no, no." She stopped. She stopped. He stopped. The car stopped. She walked across the street. The parents were in the garage. They were trying to watch their children. Things just happen when you got kids. There are kids of all ages in that neighborhood. I appreciate numbers just like these guys do, but I think it's prudent and wise to put a stop sign at this intersection. I would also ask, I would like to know the average numbers, not just of all places we put stop signs, but for neighborhoods of that nature with children. What is the average number? Is it 500? Is it 1,000? I just think some comparable numbers would be helpful. I would also say it sounds like there is a grid at this one intersection, at least where we're at in the neighborhood, so there is nothing to slow them. There's not a turn. There's not a cul-de-sac. It's not winding. It is straight from east to west, north and south. And so I think those are things that when you come and look at the intersection, you take those into consideration. You say, this is a place for a stop sign. Thank you guys for giving me a chance to come speak to y'all today.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Dorman, the next step for us is more discussion, or?
No, you can discuss the item, and then if you need to resolve the issue, either affirm the decision or.
So we need to take a vote.
You'll need to take a vote. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Could we talk a little?
Let's talk. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you want to go first?
Oh, okay. I just think there has to be a solution, something, and maybe it's not something that the city does, but it's something that the neighbors can do, and I don't know what it is. I'm not the traffic person. I threw out my orange flag thing, and the only other thing I can think of is making a cutout of a police car and putting it on the corner. Do you know of what other neighborhoods have done in other areas, neighbors getting together to do things?
I'm not aware of specifically what neighbors have done. Like I said, there are programs throughout the country of what are called neighborhood traffic calming programs. If there's a concern about speed, it's how do you change the environment of the road. The one thing I'd say is here you are dealing with an intersection which kind of limits the types of things that would address their concerns. So, stop signs, yield signs, or some type of signage that does force a movement to stop, would definitely address their concerns. It just doesn't meet the engineering criteria that we apply. So if you're looking for a solution, I think accepting their recommendation over ours is probably the easiest, most consistent, straight path forward. Because outside of that, the types of solutions become more costly. Like I said, if you're going to physically construct an object in the middle of that intersection, that would be an easy thing to do, but would definitely cost more than the installation of signs. The thought just came around. Some of the more creative individuals have done things such as painting the street in their intersections. I'm not advocating for people to go out and paint their streets, but I know City of Portland has a program where neighborhoods have taken to painting designs in their street. So it does create that visual transition that you were talking about. So that's something that neighborhoods have done. I don't think you'd want to recommend that without some kind of control or guidance on what's allowed. But
yeah, I think something that, you know, Councilor Darlington, when you were talking about the orange flags and the fact that it's a different, and I can't speak for other drivers, but I've lived in a couple of neighborhoods over the years with children, and if we put, as Dr. Peak was saying, you put a children at play sign that's there 24/7, you get kind of immune to it. But those places where I live, where people purchase, they have them available to the public. They're little plastic polystyrene, bright orange or green, safety green. When the kids are out playing, you go out and set them right next to the curb, and it's like, oh, the kids are out today. And at the end of the day, when they're not playing, they go to bed, take them up. So they're not there all the time. Or if the kids are in school and not playing, they're not there. But when the kids come home and you go out, mom and dad sticks it by the curb, it catches your attention because it's not there all the time. Again, we're not in a position to recommend that. I can't recommend what individuals do, but it's something that they might look at and see if they might want to try that. I think it's a combination of things might help.
Councilor Weaver?
Well, I'll stick my neck out here a little bit. When I go through my neighborhood, I go through 7 intersections, and at least half of them, I have to be mindful of children that live in the neighborhood, and I generally go slow. And I would do that whether a stop sign was there or not, or a yield sign, because children don't pay any attention to those kind of signs, usually when they're at play. The burden's on the driver. And so, you know, as I look at that neighborhood, I see lots of places where you could put signal devices, whether it's a yield sign or a stop sign, but I don't think we're in a position to do that everywhere. And so I appreciate the request, and I'm sympathetic to what their comments are, but I think I have confidence in Mr. Peak, and I think he's made a sound recommendation. He would listen to them, and he would consider their request, and I support what he's recommending.
Councilor Nahara?
You know,
And I'm sorry.
no, that's all right.
And those people that would roll around an intersection with just disregarding kids would do it whether that sign was there or not. And I'm afraid it would give somebody a false sense of security.
I first want to say thank you to the citizens. I think it takes a lot to do this, and so I appreciate you doing that. I will say, obviously, in my everyday life, I'm a property and casualty adjuster with an insurance company, and so in my thoughts in this process is, and you stole my comment, so I should have spoke up when you said something, but I think of what can prevent something from happening, and I completely agree with Joe. When I take statements or when I talk to people after they've been in accidents, the first thing I think of, would this been prevented had something stopped them? And the majority of the people, they're going to stop whether there's a stop sign or not. Those are the people that are going to slow down when they see your kids playing, or when, you know, if they live in that neighborhood and they've seen them playing, they're going to think, hey, there's kids there, I need to slow down. People that are going to go through this intersection fast, this is in the middle of nowhere. They're going to go through it fast whether there's a stop sign or not. They're going to maybe slow down. They're not going to stop. I mean, when we got this, I drove over there, and, you know, there's nothing over there. They know there's not going to be a cop sitting there. And so in my mind, putting a stop sign there will, you know, I don't see it making a big difference. And I also think we'll just get a lot more requests to bombard this neighborhood with stop signs. And I don't think that helps with flow. I'm not a traffic engineer, Dr. Peak, but I know you would recommend it if it didn't, and I think that's part of the reason why it's not. And so I appreciate your concerns, and I wish there's something we could do, but in my mind, I don't think a stop sign would warrant in this area.
The comment about a cardboard police car, maybe it would be wise to put a patrol vehicle out there periodically until we get the issue dealt with. I mean, and not just one time. But
That's fine.
Sure.
We have a police officer who lives at the intersection who's required to keep his car at his home.
I was wondering if he was just there that day I drove by or if he lived there. Okay.
So it is there at all times. So if you drive that intersection, most of the time during the day, you're going to see his vehicle sitting there. I would also say if this gets denied, I might put in a request for a speed bump or something like that. I have lived in neighborhoods before that have had speed bumps but no stop signs. So I think something to slow the flow of traffic, even if it's not a stop, but I think it's incumbent upon the city to think about its pedestrians and kids at play just to get the flow of traffic slow. But just to the police officer, I want to say that there actually is.
So there's a police car parked visibly, and
Yes.
people are still
taking wide
cutting
turns.
that turn.
Still
That's amazing.
driving quickly. I think a stop sign, people stop at stop signs. Most of them, people do run them, and most people stop at stop signs. And I was going to say earlier, but I forgot, the point that we don't have stop signs at these 37 intersections, to me, that doesn't mean there shouldn't be stop signs. That just means there's not a precedent for it.
How old's this neighborhood? How old's the neighborhood? I mean, the home's what, 10 years, 15 years?
It's a mixture. I think it's, that as you get closer to 19th, they're older homes as you get back towards Country Club and that's
So
newer.
10, 15 years, I think.
At least, yeah.
I mean, if there's still discussion, that's fine, but I would say my recommendation is to go with staff's recommendation of taking no action. I don't know if that's the proper recommendation, or
Is that the motion?
Well,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead and motion. I can still
do my
discuss.
motion, yeah. Yeah, we can still discuss, I'm saying,
yeah.
my recommendation or motion is to go with staff's recommendation of putting no stop sign at this intersection.
This one tugged at me too. I run that area, familiar with it, but I also, as hard as it is, I also agree. As a runner, I have jumped out of the way of people who have been at a stop sign who didn't stop or didn't, just because they don't pay attention. They're used to driving the routine, the route, and it's slower pace, and so.
As parents, we always want to protect. It's what we do is we protect our kids. I also have raised children and had children playing in my driveway and running around, and my neighborhood doesn't have stop signs, and it just has a curve. And once in a while, people do go too fast. So I absolutely appreciate what you're saying. Absolutely. I had written down a false sense of security. I don't know who said that, but and I had also written down paint. But then I also speed bumps aren't necessary. They aren't. The city doesn't do speed bumps, right? That's a neighborhood thing. Am I correct in that, Dr. Peak?
We don't have any type of traffic calming or speed bump program. There have been speed bumps installed around town in the past, but we don't have any formal program doing that.
I've lived in neighborhoods. I think that's why probably someone asked about an HOA. There must be a neighborhood group or an HOA around there somewhere. And that might be able to help. I don't know. Or paint that says slow children or just a neon orange. I don't know what our ordinances or any rules that we have for that. I guess what I'm saying is there's no good answer, and even if there were stop signs, I'm not for sure that you should be comfortable. And we can't put stop signs everywhere there are children. I'm sorry. But that's my recommendation, is to listen to staff. But I want you to be able to do something to put, I like the idea of putting something out when your children are out playing. If the cop is sitting there, he's at home though, correct? He's not out there writing tickets. So maybe there's something that, a patrol. Does it increase in the summer when it's warm weather, or is it in the fall and the spring when there are more people in town?
You're asking me. I would say that the traffic is pretty consistent. Obviously, children are out more than the spring and summer because the weather's nicer. even if we're out in the front yard with the kids, that doesn't keep my fast 3-year-old from sprinting down the street.
Yeah.
And I would also say, why put stop signs anywhere if we won't stop for stop signs?
I'm not sure I'm willing to accept there's no good answer. This is the answer that we have now. I think one very exciting thing is people in a neighborhood who want something different for their neighborhood. And there's, in the time I've been working with the staff, I've been so impressed with their openness. And I think that, start Googling traffic calming programs and see what will work with our ordinances. I think, I can see the straightness of this Mansfield. I can see why people would just kind of speed up and make that a runway. So it's not just the intersection. So if you could engage more neighbors, and there is nothing that says neighbors can't get together and find another possibility, or other possibilities. There has to be something that would be better.
I just going to add something, and Dr. Peek, I've looked at the data, and I believe we had our traffic counters out there for a week, for a 7-day period. And it's only one 7-day period. It doesn't answer the question about what time of year. But our equipment records number of vehicle speeds, time of day, so we can look at that data and say, okay, here's the time of day and the day of the week where those counts are at a peak. It might be productive to maybe have an officer go out there during that peak time. I would hate to set an officer out there when the counts are 2 cars every hour. It's not going to do much good. But if we know there's a period when there's 40 or 50 cars coming by in an hour, that would be a good time of day. We might, as Councilor Weaver suggested, maybe let them know that we're giving it some attention. That's a place we could start.
It's a start.
And I think we can explore other things. I just, I don't know all the answers this evening, but, again, and I think as Councilor Darlington was saying, if the 2 or 3 interested people we heard tonight, if they would start maybe having some meetings of multiple people in their neighborhoods, and maybe they could come up with some joint suggestions of what they might be able to do as a neighborhood, and then we could meet with them and see if we can find some joint things to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know if there's an HOA or a neighborhood group, which I can understand, sometimes they're very quiet, or you don't know if you don't pay homeowners any HOA fees or anything like that, you can start one. And one of the neighborhood groups are powerful, and you could hand out literature that's as easy as just making copies and taking it to neighbors to see what could be done, or to have a meeting, or to ask people to slow down, to say that you think that there's a problem, that that there's a problem right there. I wish I want your children to be safe. Absolutely. I want all children to be safe. And it's just keep being good parents and being out there with your children and watching them. And if your traffic changes, then we will look at it again if it would pick up, correct? Anything else?
I think Councilor Nahara made a motion. I think I'm willing to second it. I'm a grandparent too, I understand. But on a business end and just administratively, I trust our staff, and I think they're as concerned about safety and my grandkids and your grandkids as anyone is. And I'm just not convinced that the signage addresses the problem. So I second Miguel's motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go with staff's recommendation of no stop sign to not install a stop sign. Let's take a vote.
So what am I voting for?
Oh,
If you vote yes, then you're affirming the manager's decision to not.
The motion to sustain the
Yes,
decision.
to sustain.
and that motion passes to accept the manager's decision. The motion passes 5-0.
And we will do some things to continue to look at the area and see if we can find some quasi-solutions. But I would suggest that they do follow the neighborhood organization suggestion.
Okay, that takes us to item B, which is the local project agreement with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, ODOT, to relocate the rural water line along Country Club Road from McElroy Avenue to Lakeview Road, CC-15-57.
Yes, this is, even though it's a Department of Transportation issue, it's a water issue. So I'm going to ask our water utilities director, Bill Mellis, to give you a little update on this project. Please.
Good evening. Thanks for bearing with me there. Bill Mellis, Water Utilities Director, here this evening to talk to you about a local project agreement between the Department of Transportation and the city, which will allow ODOT to receive bids for and construct a water line along with the Phase 2 Country Club Road project. As a reminder, if you're not familiar with that, the yellow highlighted area is the Phase 1, the construction project that's underway right now. Country Club Road from 6th Avenue to McElroy, including both intersections. Phase 2 is the red highlighted area from just north of McElroy up to and including the intersection at Lakeview. And in this case, the water line will be constructed along with the roadway project. And it's not a city road project, it's a county and ODOT project. But because we have a city water line, a city-owned rural water line in the county right-of-way, we're obligated to move the water line at our expense to accommodate the road project. Just wanted to give you the map there for reference of what businesses and neighborhoods are affected by this section. For the current item, there's not asking you to take any action, but just to report on this status. And later on in the agenda, there is a resolution to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. And then on the SUA agenda, there's a similar resolution as well as an item requesting authorization to make payment to ODOT for our portion of the work, or the current estimate of our portion of the work, and to authorize expenditures for the project. And so no action required now, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, that's all I've got.
Mr. Mayor? Madam Mayor?
Councilor Weaver.
So you're talking about the Country Club project that's underway?
Well, this is Phase 2 of that project. Originally, the project was intended to do both miles.
Okay.
And then due to funding constraints, I believe at the county.
But what I'm trying to get to is we really don't have much of a position to not move the water line, right?
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear.
Yeah, we can move it, or we have let them demolish it. We need to move it.
We could probably, and correct me, Mr. Mills, but I think we could probably bid it and do it ourselves. But I think the theory is that there's a lot of work being done in package that we'll probably get a more favorable bid letting ODOT do it. They're managing the overall project. They can coordinate the schedule, and so it's more cost effective and project effective.
It's not like we can do nothing.
Yeah, no, we have.
Yeah, we can't do nothing.
And we think this is a more effective way to do it.
And also, both on the current Phase 1 and on Phase 2, there's dirt work that has to happen to allow the water line placement. So instead of juggling, it's a lot better to let one contractor handle both aspects of the project.
Mr. Millis, you nicely put the businesses there to locate at this. Will they be affected by the water line being placed?
Well, as with any water line project, there will be. What we try to do, though, is construct the new water line before taking the old one out of service. And there's typically a short-term service interruption for every customer as we switch their service from the old line to the new line.
Okay.
And that's coordinated. Sometimes there's wider scale outages to make tie-ins of the water mains, and those are advertised and notice distributed to the customers, businesses and residential. And then on an individual basis, we also communicate with each customer to let them know when their individual service will be switched over
So they'll tie into that water line?
to the new
The
water
businesses?
line. Yes, ma'am.
And how large is that water line?
It's an 8-inch.
It's
Mike,
replacing, the new one is 8 inches, replacing an 8-inch?
Yes, there's an 8-inch. Part of this alignment, I think there's two 8 inches now, but that's not a requirement. So we're replacing it with one 8-inch for the entire mile, tying into. It's an 8-inch on Phase 1 going south on Country Club Road. I think there's a 10-inch on McElroy and a 6-inch on Lakeview. We're doing work at the intersections as well to get out of the way of the road project. And whenever we do that, we evaluate what the water demands are in the area and the needs now and in the future to make the best choices to the size of the line.
Is that residential drinking water and fire?
No,
water?
This is the rural water system, which does not provide fire protection. So it's drinking water for for residential and commercial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilors, any questions, Vice Mayor?
No? Thank you.
Okay, so we can wait for that resolution. Okay. All right, let's move on to resolutions. And resolution A, or under A, resolution number CC-2015-10, a resolution of the Stillwater City Council adopting an operating budget for the fiscal year 2015-2016. Is there any more discussion on this? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve Resolution CC 2015-10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2015-10, City of Stillwater operating budget for fiscal year 2015-16. Let's vote. And that motion to adopt resolution number CC-2015-10 is approved 5-0. On to item B, resolution number CC-2015-11, a resolution authorizing execution of a certain project agreement with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to facilitate Phase 2 of the reconstruction of Country Club Road to relocate the rural water line along Country Club Road between McElroy Avenue and Lakeview Road. Any more discussion?
No.
Motion to approve 2015-11.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2015-11. And that resolution passes 5-0. That takes us to ordinances. Ordinance number 3305 on second reading. Mr. Dorman.
An ordinance adopting the corridor redevelopment area regulating plan, establishing the map location of the specific transects within the corridor redevelopment area planning district, and establishing an effective date.
I'm sorry.
Adoption of this tonight will adopt the map that will put into effect the corridor redevelopment district, and I believe the effective date is it July 2nd? Yes. July 2nd. We're going to publish tomorrow. We've already got the map ready to go, so 30 days out, we'll be fully operational.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 3305. And ordinance number 3305 is adopted with a vote of 5-0. That takes us to Item 10. Reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Request for an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B4 for the purpose of confidential communication regarding pending litigation, Franklin C. Smith versus Officer Michael Castile et al., case number CIV 1437HE, United States District Court, Western District of Oklahoma. It is my opinion that public discussion of this matter will impair the ability of the city to prosecute and defend this pending litigation in the public interest. Second item, request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B2 to discuss labor negotiations with Fraternal Order Police Lodge number 102 and International Association of Firefighters Local 2095.
Okay, miscellaneous from City Manager.
Nothing really further. We do have 4 meetings this evening because of the required budget adoption. I would maybe suggest when we recess before executive session to do the CEDA and the Stillwater Public Works Authority. They're both very, very short, should be short. Do those first, then the SUA, and then come back. We have some staff that are here for CEDA, and they'd be able to leave a little, so would request that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, miscellaneous items from City Council. Anything?
I do.
Yes.
I would like to. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Darlington.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to give a report to the rest of the council about councilor office hours. Councilor Nahara and I did that project last month. It was quite interesting. And we had, I had, and I think Councilor Nahara had, a number of people who contacted us ahead of time, having seen the notice in the newspaper or on the website, and liked the idea very much. We were not actually bowled over at our Brahms or bagel shop locations. It was very interesting, though. I probably learned more than the people who who came to visit me. And we would like to do this again. There's no cost, there's no additional cost involved at all. And no, Ms. Fletcher said that there was not a great deal of time that she had to spend on it. I'll also like to open it up to any other counselors who'd like to be involved, kind of have a schedule for at least the next 6 months, and get that to Ms. Fletcher so she can advertise it well, and we'll evaluate after that, see if we want to continue. But if you are interested, let us know. Let me know.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to that intersection request. It's hard when we have to take something that's contrary to what a citizen is asking us to do, but sometimes we have to balance it out with the administrative requests of staff. It's just not a fun decision to have to make, and none of us enjoy it, I know.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate the work Mr. Peak does, and I think the staff do an admirable job.
Thank you. Yes, I think we all agree with that, and I'm glad we don't have to do those very often. And I hope that they can come up with a solution too. So, anything else? Okay.
If I could just make a comment, I just wanted to commend Councilor Darlington and Nahara for having those opportunities for the public. I'm a real big supporter of that. Since we, if more council want to do it, that's fine. But I mean, I think it's good to get some feedback. One thing I would suggest is maybe take a city map and try to pick some locations throughout the city to move around, because we don't have a ward system. So, try to have some on the south side, on the west side, the north side, get into different types of neighborhoods and places that are convenient. And I think it would be really, really interesting, the kind of feedback that you might be able to hear and bring back to us here, and will help us all, I think, do better. So I appreciate that, and I know not everybody has the time to do it, but again, I would suggest try to move around the city and get as much varied input as you can.
Absolutely. And if anybody has a suggestion for a location, counselors
Yeah.
or citizens.
Or citizens.
Yeah.
Email us.
Yeah. We want to pick places that are accessible, that, we're not going to pick a restaurant that you have to buy a full meal, but someplace you can maybe just get a cup of coffee.
When school's back in session, you may want to have some on campus.
That's right. We've already thought of that. Absolutely.
Well, power of conversation is a good thing. So I'm happy to help with that.
Okay, great.
I also want to say thank you to Councilor Nahara and Vice Mayor Darlington for starting this. And it's all about communication. So thank you for wanting to continue it, and to everybody who will participate in that. I'm certain we all will at some point.
One quick thing, I wasn't going to do this publicly, but everybody's heard about it, and kind of a sad news day in one respect. Long time Chief Financial Officer and previously City Finance Director and Treasurer, Marcy Lamb. Been with the city a long, long time. Invaluable employee. Her husband is taking a position in the Dallas area, and so she's not going to be with us more than another month or two. And we certainly hate to see you go, but we wish you well in the new opportunity, and just wanted to say thank you. We'll recognize you again before we're finished, Marcy, but it's kind of a mixed emotion day. You like to see good things happen to people, but certainly going to miss you. Thank you.
Well said. I think we all feel that way.
Commuting's not so bad, is it? Commuting's not that bad, is it?
We can never get commercial air service.
So one other thing that my records indicate, Mr. Dorman, actually, my records indicate that we have 2 counselors who are going to be absent at the next meeting, which is June 15th. And therefore, I would like to move oil and gas, the ordinance, if we were hearing the ordinance, along with any other business that has substantial impact to the city, to July 6th. Because we have 2 counselors gone, and because, especially for this ordinance, we started a long time ago with discussion, and we need to end with discussion. And we need 5 people to discuss it. There's just no way around it. We've worked too hard, we've worked too long to only have 3 people decide what we're going to do. And we have to get it right. So we need each counselor here.
Staff will also take a hard look at all the agenda items, and you know, there's many items you'd really like to have everybody here. If there's some that we can delay without a problem, we'll try to do that and accommodate that. But we'll work on that as well.
And that does help us too, because we are struggling with the odor/air quality standards. I met with a group of city attorneys last week, and we talked about that particular part of it at length, and we are trying to get some assistance from the Department of Environmental Quality and perhaps the EPA. So a little extra time to work on that would be much appreciated. So thank you.
Okay. Well, you know, I said this before, but our goal is to make it a safe and appropriate and legal ordinance that respects city economics. And to get it right, we may be taking more time than people like. I know it's going to upset some people. I know they're going to be critical of this decision, but we are making our very best effort. We've been working on this a long time, and I hope everyone can understand. That's why I brought this up. So, with that said, we have some appointments, and I'm going to take the lead on every appointment because I actually have to replace myself on several committees when I was a city councilor. And so for Stillwater Economic Development Advisory Committee, I am going to appoint, with his approval, Councilor Weaver. Do you accept?
Certainly.
Okay. Stillwater Medical Center Board Nominating Committee, I am going to appoint Councilor Weaver. Do you accept?
Sure.
Stillwater Public Schools Coordinating Committee, I am going to nominate Councilor Nahara. Do you accept?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
The OSU Student Government Association Committee, I am going to nominate Councilor Zanotti to actually join Councilor Nahara on that. Do you accept?
I do, yeah.
And the Land Development Committee, Councilor Zanotti, I am going to appoint you to join Vice Mayor Darlington.
Okay.
Okay. And the Administrative Review Committee, which I'm still on, I am going to appoint Councilor Nahara. Do you accept?
Yeah.
Okay. So we filled the vacancies, and we're back on track. This takes us to executive session. I'm going to recess this meeting, and we're going to go to CEDA, and then to the Stillwater Public Works, and then we'll go to SUA. So if you'll just go ahead and go to your CEDA. I'm going to call the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting to order, the June 1st, 2015 CEDA meeting to order. And councilors and vice mayor, does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent docket?
No, thank you.
Nope. Motion to approve consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. And the consent docket is approved, 5-0. That moves us to general orders, review of the downtown redevelopment project request for qualifications. Mr. Galloway, what's going on with this item?
Wow. Yeah, we had a tremendous response to the RFQ. We had 13 firms submit their qualifications and discussion of what they could offer to the city council in trying to finalize a concept or develop a concept and work with all the stakeholders in the community on the downtown project. Those, most of those proposals are 75 or 80 pages long, so there's several thousand pages. And I have a staff committee, Ms. Dennison, Mr. McClenny, Dr. Peak, and myself are going through those, looking at them from the professional design standpoint, and looking at how well they seem to understand what the goals of the council are and understand the projects and Stillwater. And in most cases, we think probably some experience in this part of Oklahoma is going to be of some value. We're not at this point going to dismiss those firms who don't have it here, but again, we're looking at all that, and we haven't really got through them all. I'd like to get it down. I think it would be a horrendous task for the council or any group that you might want to actually interview 10 or 12 firms. I think that would be really kind of overkill. But I think we've got some pretty keen staff, and I'd like to get 4 or 5 firms that we really think fit what you all are looking for, and then suggest that you all, have a review process and interview as many as 4, maybe 5. It all depends when you see the recommendations. You may not want the trustees to do it. You may want a broader group. Mayor, you might have a thought on that.
I would like to have the Stillwater Economic Development Authority Committee involved in this. We have leaders on that, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for them to provide their input on such an important item. So I would like for that group to do the review of the proposal.
It's up to council. I think it's a great idea. I'll weigh in before we discuss it. I'm sorry about that. But CDAC, as we refer to it, Stillwater Economic Advisory Council. It's created by an MOU. We've had OSU and Stillwater Industrial Foundation and the Chamber on this group, and they had a similar task. They were charged with working with all the stakeholders and the consultant when we did our branding effort, and we're getting ready to do a major rollout on that. We've already begun implementation of it. So they did well with that. We have recently expanded CDAC for people's edification. We have asked Meridian Technology to join. They do have an arm of economic development. We've also invited the Payne County Economic Development Authority to join the group, and as well as Cowboy Technologies. It's now an affiliate of OSU, but they're doing the technology park. So a lot of people have interest.
We've also added Red Dirt.
Red Dirt DMO. The visitors and tourism is a component of economic development as well. And so we're going to have a broad interest. And I think all of those groups, I can't think of any of them that won't have some valuable perspective on how the growth of our central business district is going to relate to what they all do. So personally, I think it's a great suggestion.
It's a think tank is what I like to call this. It's bright minds sitting together who have a lot of experience and a lot of different opinions from different parts of the city, all to do with economic development. So this is the perfect opportunity.
And then their recommendations would come through.
They would come back to us, and then
yeah.
we could decide.
You get the final decision.
So you're saying knock it down to 4 to 5 and then take that to CDEC and then let
Right.
them make a recommendation and that would come to us.
That's great.
I think when you have 13, they all start to run together at some point. So I think you do have to have a cutoff point where you can say, okay, the top 4, 5, 6 are the ones to really look at. And based on the group that you've suggested, I think we certainly have a well-rounded viewpoint of what needs to happen. So I trust them.
And we do have a criteria.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do we...
Is there a bid member on the CDEC?
Pardon?
Is there a bid member on CDEC?
The city?
The city is?
The city represents the bid. I think it might be beneficial to put a bid board member on CDEC, even though I understand the city represents them, but
You mean on this selection, or do you mean on CETA?
either or.
We,
Getting some weird looks, so maybe just on the select. I definitely think they need to be involved in the selection. I think Amy Jo is kind of a city representative, and so to put her on there as the selection for the bid, I think, to me, that doesn't fully serve the bid. I think you really need just a citizen, not someone who works for the city and represents them. I think you have to have a bid board member.
I agree with you to be on the selection.
And especially with their thing they sent us, I think they have some ideas, and I think they're pretty grouped together on what they want. So I think that person could represent, 200 businesses or however many downtown. And so I think it'd be very beneficial.
We've, I think what, when CDAC meets and we send them this request, I think it's a good suggestion to invite the bid board, which is all property owners in the bid district, to send a representative to participate in this review. We recently had a committee study extensively the membership and the new membership. We have several components that the city gets involved in economic development. For example, we have our retail component internally, we have the bid component internally, and that's why we chose to have 2 city councils represent all city internal activity on the board on a regular basis. But I do agree that since this project is in the center of the property owned by those 200 members, I think their involvement in the review would be an excellent addition to that.
We meet next month, and we will take care of that. Thank you, Councilor Nair. All right, so do we vote on this?
I think a motion would probably be appropriate since you're referring this out. And as I understand it, the motion would be to refer the top candidates for this project to the CDAC board along with a representative of the bid board.
To make a recommendation back
to the council.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this. Don't know that I can say that all.
I don't remember all.
I tried to write it down, but you were talking to refer top candidates to the CDAC board and to also add a bid district representative. is approved 5-0.
Before we move on, is there a rough timeline of review? I mean, obviously you just said it's 1,000
Well,
pages.
we'll be able to submit the top 4 or 5 to CDAC and one of the bid members prior to their meeting.
This in July?
Yeah, they have a meeting in June.
Oh, you're
And
oh.
so as soon as they meet, we will establish a review schedule, invite the applicants to come for their interviews, and again, we'll work that schedule out at the next meeting of CDAC, I hope. So we want to keep this moving.
Okay.
Okay, that takes us to resolutions, and resolution number SEDA-2015-1, a resolution of the Stillwater Economic Development Authority adopting an operating budget for the fiscal year 2015-2016. Any more discussion on this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution 2015-1, the operating budget for fiscal year 2015-2016. Let's vote. And that resolution passes with a vote of 5-0. With no other business for CEDA, the June 1st, 2015 meeting is adjourned at...
Motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
I need a motion to adjourn. Okay. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned at 6:51. Push the buttons. There we go. All right.
No, we got you.
Okay.
We got you, don't worry.
5-0. Okay. The next is the Stillwater Public Works Authority meeting. I call to order the June 1st, 2015 Stillwater Public Works Authority meeting. We go to the consent docket. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent docket?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the June 2nd, 2014 Stillwater Public Works Authority minutes. And that was approved. The consent docket is approved 5-0, which moves us to resolutions. Resolution SPWA-15-01, a resolution of the Stillwater Public Works Authority adopting an operating budget for the fiscal year 2015-2016.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the SPWA resolution, and that resolution is approved 5-0.
Can I make a quick comment on
Yes,
this? Just for everybody's edification, I think there's $103,000 in that fund. As you noticed, the last time this group met was a year ago to approve the budget last year, and the time before that was a year before that. This trust authority was created well over 20 years ago as a finance mechanism for a small project. Since then, the SUA and CEDA have been developed, and we utilize those for cities' financing of trust needs. This has become a totally inactive trust authority, and the money just sits there and draws minimal interest. We have talked about it, Marcy and I have talked about it at length, that we don't know of any practical foreseeable reason to retain this trust. And just to let you know that, I'd like to talk to Mr. Dorman, and maybe sometime during the year we could discuss dissolution of this, because I think our existing trusts more than cover our needs, and it's a duplication that's become redundant and useless. So just to let you know, we haven't forgotten that.
So are you going to bring that back to us
Yes.
at a later time? Okay. All right. Thanks for letting us know. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the June 1st, 2015 SWPA meeting. And we are adjourned with a vote of 5-0.
Now you go to SUA.
Now we will move to SUA. I call to order the June 1st, 2015 Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting. And councilors, do you wish to remove anything from the consent docket? Yes.
We'd ask the staff would request item B to be pulled from the consent agenda for discussion.
Pulled for discussion?
Pulled for discussion.
Okay.
Motion to approve consent docket without item B.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent docket without item B. Consent docket is approved, and we will discuss item B in just a minute. On to item 3, which is public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. We don't have any speakers, so we will go to number 3, items removed from the consent docket, item B.
Thank you, and good evening again. Bill Millis, Water Utilities Director. The item B that we asked you to remove from the consent docket concerns the Airport and Jardo water line to serve the power generation station. At the time of the preparation of the report that's in your packet, the information staff had available indicated that the second lowest bid was the best bid. And so that report makes that recommendation. But since that time, staff has held further discussions with the lowest bidder, and that bidder has provided additional information. Therefore, as a result of that conversation and that additional information, I wish to modify staff's recommendation to award the bid to Grooms and Pollard Utility Services in amounts similar but approximately $50,000 less than in the recommendation in your packet. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and then also to kind of correct the recommendation as it should be when you're ready.
Councilors? Vice Mayor?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Should I read the differences in names and numbers?
You probably want a dollar amount for your motion.
Well, yeah, the dollar amount for the low bid.
All right. The recommendation then will be, as it is written in the packet, with the following changes. In item 1, instead of Triangle, it's Grooms and Pollard Utility Services. The amount, $303,420. Item 2, it's change Triangle again to Grooms and Pollard in the amount of $425,725. Item 3, authorize expenditures up to $863,699. Item 4 is unchanged.
Thank you, Ms. Millis.
All right, thank you.
Who wants to make that motion?
Do we not have to have a notice on this? I mean, if it's, because this wasn't published,
Sure it was.
but I'm saying we can change that like that?
Yes,
without
we
the-
tried to go with the low bid, but there was inadequate information. And so when the recommendation came out and there was further communication with the low bidder, with the actual low bidder, and through that process, we were able to determine that they were, in fact, the lowest and best bid. And under the act, you have to go with the lowest and best bid. So there's no other written notice or anything else that is required here.
The public notice of the agenda was that you were going to make there was going to be a recommendation on award of the contract, and you could pick any of the ones,
Okay,
not
so it
necessarily.
doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Okay.
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Still made my motion.
There's
Yeah.
a motion and a second, right?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept item B with its changes?
Yeah, as recommended.
As recommended. And that motion is approved, 5-0. Takes us to general orders. Consider the natural gas intrastate firm transportation service agreement with Enable Oklahoma Interstate Transmission LLC from the new power generation station, and authorize staff to execute the agreement SUA-15-41. Mr. Galloway.
Yes, Mr. Lawrence Smith can give you a report on this. And
Good evening, trustees. Lawrence Smith, Generation and Transmission Division Manager. I'm here tonight to request approval of a natural gas interstate firm transportation service agreement with Enable Oklahoma for the new power generation station. The new station will require natural gas to fuel its reciprocating engines. Its location was chosen primarily due to the proximity to a high-pressure natural gas line owned by Enable. After releasing a request for proposals in August of 2014, it was determined that the most economical way to provide service to the site was to connect to the Enable high-pressure gas line. There are 3 individual agreements necessary to have natural gas delivered to the power generation station. One is the lateral line, which is the line you build from the high-pressure gas line to the site. The second is the connection to the high-pressure transportation line. And the third is the commodity, the natural gas commodity. On March 23rd, the trustees approved a natural gas transportation agreement with Oklahoma Natural Gas to secure the lateral piece that comes down from the high-pressure gas line to the new site. This report is limited to the connection to the Enable high-pressure gas line. The commodity will be handled, the third piece, the commodity, will be handled in the future report. During the RFP process, Enable submitted a proposal to connect into their high-pressure gas line with firm transportation commitments ranging from 100% to 0% in 25% increments. The percent of the firm represents how much space is available in the pipe to secure our maximum daily quantity that we projected for the plant. Although there is a risk that transportation may not be available when needed, after evaluating the cost variations between 100% and 0% firm, it was determined that the most cost-effective approach was to go with 25% firm transportation and 75% interruptible transportation. The term of the proposed Enable agreement is approximately 26 years, which coincides with the GRDA contract. The estimated cost for this agreement is approximately $23,000 per month, which will be budgeted as an operational expense. Upon commercial operation of the power generation station, it is anticipated that the majority of the expense related to the Enable service agreement will be covered by the monthly GRDA capacity payment. It is recommended that the trustees approve the natural gas intrastate firm transportation service agreement with Enable Oklahoma Intrastate Transmission LLC for the new power generation station and authorize staff to execute the agreement subject to legal review and satisfactory negotiations of the terms and conditions. Questions?
Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
I love hearing you read this, and I just am kind of stuck on anticipated that the majority will be covered.
Right.
And is that like you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're like 9.5 sure that it will be?
I would say about 9.5 sure. I mean, we're very sure it's going to cover most of it. We just know there could be a little part that's not, and it would be considered an operational expense.
Okay.
What is most of it? Can you ballpark? If you said it was $23,000 a month?
$23,000 a month, which is about $276,000 a year. So we're projecting that about 95% of it will be covered, but we don't know till we get there.
Councilors, anything else?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve SUA-15-41. And that motion passes with a vote of 5-0. That takes us to item B, which is consider additional expenditures required for the emergency repairs of the wastewater treatment plant influent piping, SUA-15-42.
Yeah, a few unexpected repairs this recently, so ask Mr. Millis again to give you an update on that.
Thanks, Mr. Galloway. This is, in April, the trustees authorized an emergency repair of one of the influent lines to the wastewater plant. In May, during construction, May 15th, we had what I've been calling a perfect storm because we had a heavy rain event. We had a complete collapse of the pipe coming into the wastewater plant, and we had one of the two bypass pumps fail. And so because of those events, all hitting at the same time, we had a real emergency, and we had to respond. There was I really want to, commend staff. We had an outstanding effort from staff working Friday and through the night, Friday night and Saturday, and then, halfway through the night, Saturday night. A 2-day effort with some help from a number of contractors and service providers, two especially, Crossland Heavy Contractors, our contractor that's doing the job, and Bridgeport Tank Truck, were really went above and beyond and worthy of making mention of them, helping us out to avoid a real catastrophe there. We did have a sewer overflow, not at the wastewater plant, but upstream about a half mile during the rain event Friday night. And sometimes during rain events, there are bypasses during normal situations. We had one at the same manhole Friday night and Saturday night, but we avoided a massive major overflow at the wastewater plant and anywhere else in the system due to the efforts of staff and these contractors. Mike should have introduced you here to the map. We showed you this in April, but up here where the red and yellow lines are is where the red line is the failed pipe that we identified. The yellow lines are the two main gravity lines that come into the plant. The blue line is the route of the replaced sewer line. And then the purple there is just the pumping we had in place to accommodate the pipe replacement. So during this 2 days, we responded by repairing the pumps that had broken down, adding some additional pumping capacity, restoring the ability to flow by gravity in case, the worst case, if a 100-year storm or something like that came, we needed to have some ability to get gravity flow back to the plant. And we needed to enhance our ability to handle a rain event because the rain just kept coming and coming. So that was also when the pipe collapsed, we had an inflow of mud into the headworks of the plant, which completely stopped up one of the two bar screens. So we had to clean that out to get that channel back open again and get the plant in full operation. That was the emergency response over the first couple of days after the large rain event. And as you know, the rain kept hitting us during that. Since then, what we called there on the screen, the project completion plan, was to reestablish gravity, the ability for gravity flow, and that actually was accomplished. The contractor completed, well, I won't say completed, but he got it in place, and we were able to go back to gravity flow on the blue line on Saturday. So as of Saturday, we were able to go back to gravity flow, shut the pumps down, and now the contractor is working to restore the site, which I'll just show you for magnitude. That's the enormous hole right outside the headworks of the wastewater plant. And you can't, behind the steel plates you can see there up near the building, there's another hole that's about probably 15 feet deeper than this hole, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of what the work they were doing in a lot of mud and a lot of rain while we were pumping a lot of sewage around the site. But so we have the restoration backfilling that hole. We have to accommodate some additional work on the bar screen project and then make some repairs. Some electrical lighting got disturbed, while they were digging the hole in the emergency, trying to get to the the sewer line. Some electrical lines were damaged, a ground line, a pad for a HVAC unit. So there's some repairs that we need to do. There's some further cleanup in the basement of the headworks. And then, so in order to accomplish that, the work that we've done to date, responding to the emergency and the restoration work, I'm here tonight to ask you to authorize an additional $294,000 in expenditures, which includes a change order to Crossland for some of the work they've done. It includes equipment that we needed to buy, that we needed to rent, other contractors that we needed to hire, both for the emergency over that weekend, and then this is also predicting what we'll need to restore everything back to the way it was. And so that includes a 30% contingency, which is pretty fat, but we're dealing with an unknown evolving situation that's still in that phase. And the recommendation also includes asking you to declare a continuation of the original emergency, because that's required by state law when you're spending more than $50,000 on a project without competitive bidding. So I'm glad to answer any questions, but that's all I've got.
It's a lot of money.
And we sure do appreciate your
Yes,
hard
it's
work.
A lot of hard work in the rain.
It was.
Over
I
2
can't tell you how much
days.
I appreciate staff.
It's not
everybody
fun work.
stepping up. No.
No. We certainly appreciate staff and the companies that help us avoid the catastrophe. And we thank everybody involved in
Thank
this.
you.
And we don't like to think about sewer, but it's part of the city and it's part of what we do.
Tough work, major
And
task.
it's tough work. And you never know when it's going to keep raining. So
Okay.
thank you. Counselors? Okay, so
Recommend
do we have-
approval.
do we have a motion?
I move to accept.
Staff's
Do we have to have
recommendation?
two for, one for the emergency, or?
Or is it looped into one?
You can actually declare that as part of the it's contained within the recommendations.
Okay.
You're finding that it's an emergency.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the additional expenditures and declare an emergency, a continuation of the emergency.
Yes.
Yes. Let's vote.
I'm sorry. You said we're declaring it and we're continuing it?
You're recognizing the previous declaration of an emergency at that location, which allows you to go around all competitive bidding requirements.
You did that earlier in an earlier meeting, declared the emergency. This is continuing that
Okay.
with these additional issues.
And that motion is approved 5-0. And that takes us to item C, water rates review, SUA-15-37. Mr. Galloway.
Yeah, it's been, study's been in progress for a long time. We've had several iterations and met with the council and public. And Mr. Blankenship has spent a little time trying to sort this all out into some alternatives and give you some options. I'd like for him to present what he has.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Chairman and trustees, before I dive into this presentation, I would like to publicly thank Mr. Millis for the work that he did at the wastewater treatment plant. He was the incident commander. He was the boots on the ground. He was the field general. He was out there Friday morning and through the duration. He kept me apprised as to what was going on and made sure that I was okay with the decisions he was making and the expenditures that he was making. So I would just very much like to thank him for what he did. He thanked his staff, but he certainly, without him being there, he orchestrated everything that happened. On the report, there's a list of expenditures, and Mr. Millis expressed some gratitude towards Bridgeport Trucking. Bridgeport Trucking is an oil field services company. Not quite sure how they found out about it, and it might have just been divine intervention, but they did not charge us for the services that they provided.
And their name is again?
Bridgeport Trucking.
Bridgeport
You'll
Trucking.
see BTT is the logo on the side. They have white trucks, and it's kind of an oval logo on the on the side of their trucks, and you will see them around town. They're an oil services company and trucking company, and like I said, they came in and just told Bill that they just wanted to help out. So, you know, it's people like that really make a difference. So I wanted to thank Bill and bring to your attention the services that Bridgeport provided to us at no charge. So with that, I will move on to the water and wastewater water rates. Ideally, utility rates are designed to cover the cost of operations, maintenance, debt, depreciation, and a reasonable return. In the private sector or private utility companies, they see the return as a profit to their stockholders. On the public utilities, we see the return as giving back to the community in the form of funding for services that we provide to the community. In Stillwater specifically, we refer to that as a transfer to the general fund. The recent cost of service study that was performed included a rate design, and the rate design followed that approach, the ideal approach to utility rate setting structure. However, sometimes there are situations or conditions in the real world that are not ideal. And the trustees, you have expressed a desire to see some variations to the study recommendations that better fit our situation here in Stillwater right now. We have heard those desires and we've prepared alternatives for you. We've previously, as Mr. Galloway has indicated, we've previously spent a considerable amount of time on the background. The written report that was in your packet tonight, it covers a lot of information. So I'm going to forego any discussion about the background and move directly into the alternatives. I'm going to start with retail water rates, move into wholesale and raw water, followed by the wastewater rates. If you wish to have a discussion after each section, please let me know and we'll pause and do that, or we can have the discussion and questions over the whole thing at the end, whichever suits you all best. Retail water alternatives. The cost of service study, I've prepared three alternatives for you here. The cost of service study recommends that we had a couple of alternatives there. To continue the current uniform rate structure applying across the board, increases of approximately 8% throughout the forecast period, and the forecast period is a 5-year period. The second recommendation in the cost of service study was to implement an inclining block rate structure for 3/4 and 1-inch taps. And those are predominantly residential tap customers, and then retaining the uniform rate structure for all other customers, including a reproportioning of the customer service charge to better reflect the actual cost of service based on the size of the meter. After reviewing the results of the cost of service study and having that discussion, I took a look at what we could possibly do to meet our needs and without having to go to the extent of what the cost of service study recommends. Without reducing projected expenditures, the revenue requirements for fiscal year 16 and 17 can be met with a 3% increase on July 1 of 2015 and 2016. The report actually stated 16 and 17. That was a typo that I caught when I started to put together the presentation. It would have to be 2015 and 2016, this year or next. This is more of a just-in-time approach. What the cost of service study was recommending was a smoothed approach because there will be an increase in debt over the next 4 years. In fact, in fiscal year 16, we're projecting about $1.7 million in debt payments, but by fiscal year 19, we're looking at $5.4 million. So there will be additional debt that we will have to address in the coming years, but to meet our needs for the next couple years, we can do that with a 3.6% increase. Now, one thing that this particular alternative enables the water utility to meet their allocated portion of the general fund transfer. However, over the past 5 years, the water utility has not met its allocation, and in fact, it has not even contributed to the general fund transfer. It has actually been subsidized by the electric utility. So, I guess simply stated is, from an operational standpoint on our O&M budget, our water revenues have been less than our water expenditures. With a 3.6% increase over the next 2 years, we will be able to reverse that. If you take no, and the third alternative is to take no action. If you take no action on retail water rates, the annual rate escalator will be applied on July the 1st. This year's escalation rate is 1.7%. And in this scenario, the water utility will have no surplus funds to transfer to the general fund and will most likely continue to be subsidized by the electric utility. And so those are the three alternatives for the retail water rates. If you'd like to ask questions or discuss retail water rates before we move on, I'd be happy to do that, or I'll move on whichever you prefer.
Councilors, yes.
Just for a point of clarification, the 3.6 would be in addition to the rate escalator, or
no,
instead of?
Instead of.
Okay,
instead of, yes, sir.
And I apologize, I meant trustees. Anything else?
Okay. Well, we'll move on. The next category or group is wholesale and raw water rates. The cost of service study recommends that the rates be increased beginning in fiscal year 16 and continuing for the 5-year forecast period. What they're recommending is a 5-step plan bringing the rates up to market. With the exception of Lone Chimney, the wholesale rates and raw water rates have not been adjusted in many years and are under market. Before I move on to the next two alternatives, I want to show you what the cost of service study is recommending for the wholesale and raw water rates. The first column that's labeled FY 2015, that's this current year, that is the current rates. And you can see over the 5-year forecast period, they are recommending that the rates be increased pretty substantially for most of the customers, like I say, with the exception of Lone Chimney. Lone Chimney's contract is fairly recent, and we actually, when we established that rate, we did an internal cost of service analysis to determine what their rate should be. So they are currently at market. Stepping back, the second alternative, if the trustees would so desire, would be to shorten the number of steps instead of doing it, or intervals, instead of doing it in 5 years. You could shorten that and increase the rates to get them to market level sooner. And then the third alternative would be to take no action, and obviously if no action is taken, these rates will remain the same, and with the exception of Lone Chimney, remain below market, and in most cases actually below cost. Yes, ma'am.
So what you're saying is we're losing money because we're not charging enough?
Yes. Yeah, right. It's costing us more to produce the water than we're selling it for.
Our retail customers are in essence paying for part of the water that goes to the wholesale customers, and we would definitely like to correct that.
Yes.
I mean, we need to.
I think it's very appropriate to correct that, yes. Okay. We will move on to the wastewater rate alternatives. The cost of service study recommends a 26% increase in wastewater rates in this fiscal year, and then a slight, I believe it was 1% increase in the final year of the forecast, which was once again a 5-year forecast. if the rate structure is retained in its current form. The cost of service study also offers an alternative that would make it a 21% increase in rates this year, with a restructuring of the customer service charge to better reflect the actual cost of service by meter. That would be basically allocating some of the cost to some of the larger meter holders. Without reducing projected expenditures, the revenue requirements for FY16 and 17 can be met with a 7% increase in July 1 of 2015 and a 10% increase in July 1 of 2016. This alternative, similar to the water rate alternative, this would enable the utility to meet their allocated portion of the general fund transfer. However, over the past 5 years, the wastewater utility has made a contribution to the general fund transfer only once, which is one time more than what the water utility had done in the past 5 years. And in the other 4 years, the wastewater utility was actually subsidized by the electric utility also. The third alternative would be to take no action, and once again, by taking no action, the automatic escalation factor would be implemented, and the escalation factor is once again 1.7%. And under this scenario, the wastewater utility would have no surplus funds to transfer and would most likely continue to be subsidized by the electric utility. I'm going to step over here and grab my water for a second.
Dan, on that,
yes, sir.
The wastewater, it sounds like a big percentage, but if I remember correctly, the wastewater really isn't a big cost. I mean, as far as when you, it sounds like a lot, but it was only a couple dollars, right? I mean, I can't.
Let me grab my study.
You don't know that off the top of your head?
No, I do not. But I do have it readily available. Okay. Okay. Currently, the wastewater volumetric rate is $3.30 per thousand. The 26% number would take it to $4.16 per thousand.
Okay.
So 86 cents, if my math is correct.
And then while you have that there, will you, on the actual water, retail water?
3.6.
Can you give that number?
Yeah, I can do that too. Our current rate is $6.60. At the 8% increase, it'd be $7.13. But if we went to the 3.6%, it would be just a little bit less than halfway in between there. So that's going to be under $7, or I'm sorry, $6 and maybe 80 some cents.
Okay.
So about a quarter or so, quarter to 30-cent increase under the 3.6% alternative, as opposed to the 8%, which would take it to $7.13.
And on the wastewater, we're also making up some cost with doing the service charge.
If you so choose to do so, sir, yes.
And then these numbers are actual, this wholesale, they're actual.
Yes, those are the actual numbers that we would.
Or is that?
Yeah, so right now they're paying, Noble County Rural Water District number 2 is paying $1.85 per thousand. The proposal or the recommendation out of the cost of service study would raise them to $2.26 in fiscal years 2016.
Okay, so,
and we do have a 60-day notification requirement on all of these contracts, so we wouldn't be able to make it effective until 60 days after a resolution was passed to raise those rates. So it won't be July 1 is what I'm trying to say on the raw water or wholesale.
Do they have I don't know how to word it. So if we pass that, I mean, is there anything they can do to object that?
Yes, they can. They can object, and that's why one of the reasons why we did the cost of service study is because that is what the basis in a court of law is they take a look at and see how you did your study, and if you used what's called a utility or accrual method, and that is what we directed our consultant to do and was required of them to do in the contract. That is the appropriate methodology. And then we provided them with all of the information from accounting, and so they can protest that, but we feel that we have followed the appropriate methodology, and that there's really nothing that we're aware of that would trip us up on that.
Perfect.
The recommendation, rate setting is a policy issue. The recommended alternatives have been presented. The trustees may select an alternative in each category or direct staff to develop additional alternatives, whatever your pleasure is. We will then either develop additional alternatives, or if you see one that you think is appropriate for our situation, we will go back and we will draft a resolution and bring that for your approval to formally implement the rate structure that you so desire.
Vice Mayor.
Mr. Blankenship, I have a question about the paragraph relating to water and wastewater that talks about the staff's ability to complete projects.
Yes, ma'am.
And that it sounds like most of the most effort, staff time, is dedicated to 2040 and money.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Water 2040 is, I think, about an $80 million program. And until that program is completed, the majority of their time is going to be spent on that particular program. So there will be other projects that will be getting done, but not near as many as if we didn't have that particular program. I made that point to help, I guess, justify if we were to go with the 8% increase as recommended in the cost of service study, you would see, and our customers would see, a fund balance starting to build in our water capital account, just because we wouldn't have the resources over the next 2, 3, 4 years to really spend that money. It's money that needs to be ultimately collected and spent, but do we need to collect it at this particular point in time? Maybe not. We're not going to be able to spend it as rapidly as we would collect it. So I just wanted to put that there as a point of consideration when you look at the different alternatives.
Thank you.
Can you briefly remind me on the block structure?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember that diagram. I should have probably brought that.
That's okay. What that did was it actually took the 1 inch and the 3/4 inch, and it left their rates the same for the implementation, and it shifted that cost to the larger meters, and then on the ensuing years, then it was an across the board for all. The intent of the tiered or the stepped for 3/4 and 1 inch was an attempt to address the affordability objective that was identified early on in the process.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Councilor Weaver.
Let's see, several comments come to mind on this. And I know I sort of have a different philosophy on a lot of this than staff do, and that's to be recognized. I mean, that's just how it is. I will say, though, I really appreciated the report that you sent to us all several weeks ago. I thought that pretty well laid out the choices that we have to make, and that was dead on. I know in my work, I wish I had more money for depreciation than I have. And the way I could make that right is by raising tuition substantially. You know, 8-10% a year for the next foreseeable future. But we don't, because we have to recognize our customers and their ability to pay, as you alluded to a little bit earlier. So I think the council, not this council, but previous councils, by electing the 2040 plan, made a de facto choice to deferred maintenance even more by pushing out a 2040 plan and doing more capital new construction. That wasn't my preference at the time. You know, as I said before, charging today's customers for 2040 build out didn't make a lot of sense to me. I know we have to build for the future and we have to stay ahead of the game, but 2040, if I would have, I think the council, not this council, but prior councils, had they known we could be facing 8 or 9% water increases, they might have wanted to scale back 2040 to say 2030 or something. Does that make any sense?
Sure.
Because I certainly don't want to just totally give up on depreciation. We have to
Absolutely.
get to a place where we have regular routine maintenance. But I think we're having to sacrifice this, in my view, in order to keep our rates at a level that are competitive and fair to the customer base that live here now.
Right.
Okay? And as to transfers from the SUA to the general fund, I've said it before, it doesn't hurt my feelings any if the water utility can't transfer money to the general fund.
Understood.
That
yes.
doesn't bother me a bit.
Good.
Agreed. I've said before that I think we should try to wean us off the utility authority and for general expenditures. I mean, something is, I understand that we can't do it completely, but I think we are relying on it too much. And the citizens are still paying for those expenditures. They're just doing it through utility rates.
That's right.
And so at some point, perhaps the citizens ought to get to vote on whether some of these things continue through the use of sales tax instead of doing it in the method that we're doing it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And that's very much appreciate that that direction. What you've articulated there is kind of a financial policy, so to speak, and not including the portion of a transfer or allocating a portion of the transfer to the general fund from water or wastewater. And that's the type of direction that it will enable us then to deliver exactly what you're looking for.
Mayor, and just the only other thing I might add, I thought that the work that you'd done in the past and the rates that we had set out were pretty modest. They were 2%, 3% in years. We except for the big increase when we were trying to get right and actually charge what our costs were.
Right.
But this is one of the things I hear the most about from constituents, water rate increases. And I just shudder to think what I might hear if we were to fully implement what the study proposed.
Right. You're not the only one who hears it. I can assure you.
I'll bet. I know if I'm hearing it, somebody else must be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So to me, something on the order of a 2 to 3% increase seems reasonable to me, and not out of. I just think that would be a reasonable request to put on the citizens, given the build out that we're trying to take on here.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I think, I mean, I don't know where we're at. My discussion's pretty simple. I think the on the wastewater alternatives, would like to go with number 1. I think on wholesale and raw water, I'd go with number 1, and then on retail, I think I'd like to see number 2. Maybe that percentage even be a little less than 3.6. And I also think that we should put something in there to talk about the transfer of the general fund or into the general fund. I think we should bring that down a lot from in there. I mean, it says in here it's not a ton, but I think if we're going to raise it, we need to keep the money there to use it for there. And so I think I would recommend this cost of service recommendations for wholesale and wastewater, but on retail I would go with the lower increase and also putting something in there about
Lower increase, can you give us the percentage
We
that
can-
you're looking at?
Yeah, we
Saying
can
3
actually,
points.
if we take the transfer out, that will lower that.
And-
So I think that, so far I'm hearing that we want to take the transfer out, and I'm getting some nods and some pretty firm direction that we don't want to include in the calculation of the cost of service any transfer to the general fund for water and wastewater. And that will bring those down. And so we,
And am I understanding that would just go into this water surplus?
that would,
If there's any surplus?
if there were any surplus, what it would do, would enable me to lower the rate increase to a point to design so that we would be making ends meet. And it should get that down probably into the range that Trustee Weaver has expressed on the water side, in that 2 to 3% range. Maybe even the lower end of that.
Just to be clear, I'd really like 0.
I understand.
But it's
Believe
not-
me.
But
Yes.
we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, if we keep it the same, we're going to be I mean, we're not failing, but I mean, we're going to be stuck in a couple of years, and we're going to stick it on another council. At least this way, we understand that something has to be done, and we don't want to
Right.
stick it to the next council. But I also think that, from my perspective, the citizens will understand we're doing this, but we're also trying to take a step of saying we understand your concerns of not transferring so much over. And I think if they really look into this, they'll see we're making that effort.
Well, I don't think we're sticking it on the next council. I think we're trying to be prudent. But I think one thing I really appreciated that you said was, let's recognize our cash need, the outflow that's going to be needed.
Right.
I mean, we don't have any business taking money out of our citizens' pockets to put in our savings account that
Right.
you couldn't use if your life depended on
Right.
it until the projects are queued up.
Right.
And that's very helpful to me.
Okay.
And I think it'd be, I mean, obviously you're going to get us the percentage, but just so we can have those two to get some input from citizens before we take action on this, I think would be beneficial.
I think,
my
Mayor.
opinion, sorry.
No,
Any
I think the
discussion?
transfer is really an important topic for conversation, and I wouldn't want to have that conversation right now, just in general. But talking about it with water and wastewater and trying to adjust these rates, I think it's appropriate. But I would like for us to take a step back and look at it in the bigger context, when we have good minds and time and more information.
So you're telling us that we, no, I'm going to rephrase that. I think we should be charging what our costs are, but I don't want to,
Right.
I want to protect our customers as well, just like everybody else has said. If we can't spend it, we shouldn't be collecting it.
Right.
And I don't think we are in the business of subsidizing other water districts. I think that we're going to have to raise those rates. We are not, we shouldn't be paying for others to have cheap water.
I agree.
So how do we?
Okay, what I think I can do then is I can go back and rerun the calculations, and on the retail water rates and the on the wastewater rates, I think by just totally removing the allocation to the general fund out of that calculation, I think we're going to end up somewhere between alternative 2 and alternative 3 on those two. So I will do that, and then I'll report that. I'll provide that information to you. And then it sounds like on the wholesale and raw water alternatives that we want to just go ahead and proceed with those.
Go ahead.
And then once you see the recalculation, we can, if you feel like that best meets our situation here in Stillwater to balance our needs with our abilities to pay, and what's fair and reasonable at this time, then we'll proceed with that then.
Yes.
You made a comment about, sorry, may I?
No, go ahead.
On the wastewater and the wholesale, that we were not only below our cost, but we were below the market. And I think, for goodness sakes, we've got to cover our costs.
Yes.
And we should have an eye on the market. And I know every community has to stand on its own, but I would also like to think that on the retail water side, that we are at least mindful of the market and not getting too far out of the norm there. And some of the studies that we saw before had us
we're
really high.
Yeah, we are definitely on the higher end. If you look at directly at in the region and what the cost or the charge is, what the charge is. Yeah. Is there one thing I don't think that that I got any real feedback on is on the retail water? Is there an interest in doing the tiered for the 3/4 and 1 inch services, or do we want to just go ahead and stay with the across the board and stay with the?
I would like to see us, if you use more, you pay more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I mean, that's the tier, right?
Yes,
that was the theory.
But it wouldn't be as big of a percentage,
Right.
Right.
because we're lowering the percentage.
Right.
So we would do the tier,
Right.
but it would be a small, maybe at most a 4% or something over the life of it, rather than an 8.
Well, we're looking at probably over the next couple of years on retail water. I would suggest with a 3.6 over the next couple of years, we would even be able to cover our allocation to the general fund. So when I pull the allocation to the general fund out of that 3.6 number, we're going to be somewhere between 3.6 and 1.7, probably a lot closer to that 1.7 number than the 3.6. And then I'd have to take a look at the tier and see how that fits.
Okay.
I can't answer that.
And on the smaller users, the 3/4 and the 1 inch it would be a year before they would have
Right,
any change.
before they would
Would
even
have
see
to,
an
right.
increase.
So the
Yeah.
the
So they're
smaller
not getting
users could still be year zero, Mr.
Right, but but it's picked up on the higher end.
Yes.
With those who have larger meters than 1.5 inches and larger.
I think I'd given you some feedback weeks ago when we were asked to send you feedback on the initial, that I thought maybe the flat rate would be the best way to go. But that was when I was contemplating those large increases. I think if we can get the rate down, the rate increase down to 0 or some other number, then absolutely.
It's a little bit more equitable approach.
Yeah, that was.
And it does help affordability on those who have the smaller meters, which is typically residential.
I was just concerned about how disruptive the rollout was going to be, and it will be harder to explain to people. But if we can keep the rate down, then we could definitely, I think, defend that.
And I think the tier, I mean, from my perspective, I remember I liked it. The only thing I didn't like was that on that smaller line, I felt like on some of those we were raising them and it was going to be a big jump. But I think when we lower this, it won't be as bad because, in my mind, I kept thinking of the little old lady in her little 1-bedroom duplex that's going to get all these rates, and she uses 2 glasses of water a day.
Right.
So I think with this, the tier would be a lot more beneficial.
Okay. Well, we'll look at on the retail water. We'll look at the tier for the 3/4 and 1 inch. We'll look at the reallocation of the customer service charge, and then on the wastewater, we'll look at the reallocation. And we will not allocate any portion of the general fund transfer, so that'll reduce that revenue requirement down considerably. So prepare that. And
I would just suggest to trustees that Mr. Blankenship can get that information out to you and show you what those lower rates would be. But I think in the interest of the calendar, simultaneous to that, he should probably go ahead and prepare with Mr. Dorman the resolutions based on those numbers so that we can attempt to get those in place by the beginning of the fiscal year. I mean, you don't have to do that, but when you see the information, I know you can't vote on it, but you could at least, if you see something there that's a red flag, let me know. But
Let's think about that June 15th meeting when we
Yeah,
only
that's
have three
true,
people
yeah.
here. I'm not comfortable.
Right, and what I can do is, like I did with this report where I sent out information like 3 weeks early, I'll go right back to the drawing board as soon as I can get these numbers put together, and I'll send it out, and then when we have, a full house, then we can take action on that.
And we have a third, it's meeting on the 23rd, sometimes a study session, but we could also modify that agenda to deal with it then. So that gives you time to get the information before the 15th, talk about it, and then to the next one. But we'll see.
We'll proceed at at the time that you're comfortable and ready for us to
Yes.
proceed.
I just, it's
Well, I'll
summer
get you the
and there are
information and
vacations. And July 6th, I know that we will all be here.
Absolutely, and
That's good. Yeah, that'll work.
that's probably
July 6th
that'll
works.
probably work great. And in the meantime, that'll give us some time to put this together and get this to you, so you can start to look at it and digest it, and share any
Absolutely.
thoughts that you may have with me. So I very much appreciate the input tonight. It's been very helpful. Thank you very much.
So of your reports, I want to thank you because I know that we've asked and asked and asked,
Sure.
and you've been most accommodating, and this is very important.
It is.
And we appreciate your diligence, and thank you. Thanks for your
Welcome.
patience and for working on this so hard.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we don't need
No action.
no action. Okay. Then we are going to move to resolutions, and resolution number SUA 2015-5, a resolution of the Stillwater Utilities Authority adopting an operating budget for the fiscal year 2015-16. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Stillwater Utilities Authority operating budget for fiscal year 2015-16.
It's you.
Go ahead and ask your question now. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, I did not see it. Go ahead and ask it.
I just wondered on the transfers out, is that 16,217, does that go more places than general fund?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Part of it goes to insurance fund, self-insurance fund. Significant.
Did you have any more questions? You want to know
No.
how much goes, or do you?
No.
Okay, so that resolution passed 5-0. And that moves us to item B, resolution 2015-6, a resolution authorizing execution of a certain project agreement with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to facilitate Phase 2 of the reconstruction of the Country Club Road to relocate the rural water line along Country Club Road between McElroy Avenue and Lakeview Road. Any more discussion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve SUA 2015-5. And that motion passes, that resolution passes 5-0. That takes us to reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report tonight.
Mr. Galloway?
Nothing further.
Vice Mayor?
No, thank you.
Councilors?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn SUA. And we are adjourned with a vote of 5-0. We now move back and we reconvene into City Council. Mr. Dorman.
Yes.
And do we have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move into executive session of City Council. That's approved 5-0. We will now move into executive session.